Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for taking the time out to attend our presentation. I'm Leonard Mazur. I'm the Chairman and CEO of Citius Pharmaceuticals. And just bring your attention to, I'm going to be making forward-looking statements here. What I advise everyone all the time is please consult sec.gov for all the up-to-date information. All our filings are located there, or alternatively, citiuspharma.com, which is our website. So, give you a little bit of a background on the company and the history of it. Myself and Myron Holubiak, is now the Executive Vice Chair of the company. We actually formed a private company first back in 2013, and that private company was formed to in-license a drug, our first drug that we have, which is Mino-Lok from MD Anderson. We did that successfully and funded all of the initial phase 2B work personally ourselves at the time. And then in 2016, we decided that we had to merge in with a public company because we began to recognize that the funding for this would be somewhat beyond our capabilities, even though we've put in substantial sums of money into the company. So we found a company called Citius Pharmaceuticals, publicly traded at the time. We merged with them, and then the same year we uplisted to NASDAQ, and that was done in 2016. In 2020, we in-licensed some mesenchymal stem cell drugs from a company called Novelis, located in Cambridge, Massachusetts, formed a subsidiary company called Novocyte to be able to handle that program. Notably, in 2021, which was a big year for us, we raised $127 million. That's a combination of raises and warrant exercises. And at the same time, what we did is we acquired a license from Dr. Reddy Laboratories for a drug called Iontech, or Defentac. We have several names for it right now that are in process. And that drug was a late phase 3 drug. So what that did, that expanded our portfolio so that we had two very late stage drugs, which you'll be hearing about very shortly. So in terms of our pipeline, presently we have 5 programs. As I said, 2 of them are extremely late phase. Iontech, which will have a BLA filed in the second half of this year, and Mino-Lok, which is our lead asset and still is our lead asset. The last patient in will be at the end of this year in December, in all likelihood of 2022. Both drugs we expect to have, we expect to have them cleared and approved towards the end of 2023. We also have some drugs that came a little bit later in the cycle. One of them, and it is really hard for me to go switching from suddenly talking about very serious drugs to hemorrhoids. So basically, we have a hemorrhoid drug that we picked up. It was part of a legacy drug at Citius when we merged with them. And the reason we kept it in the portfolio is because, believe it or not, in this day and age, there are no FDA-approved prescription drugs for the treatment of hemorrhoids. You have the over-the-counter side of the market, which has Preparation H, and that follows, more or less comports to the OTC monograph. And then there are DESI drugs, or old drugs that were around, most of them combinations of Hydrocortisone-Lidocaine, that are still on the market today without any FDA approval. So that's the reason why we kept it, because we thought if we could show in one trial that we've got efficacy, we'll be able to out-license it and monetize it for the shareholders of the company. That's our goal for that. Then in terms of earlier phase, we have the mesenchymal stem cell drug that we licensed from Novelis. That's still in a preclinical phase and yet has to get through an IND process. And then we also licensed another drug from MD Anderson called Mino-Rap, and this is for women who have had breast cancer surgery who are candidates for or desire to have an implant. Before the implant can be inserted, something known as a tissue expander is inserted into the chest wall to build out a pocket to be able to accommodate the breast implant. The problem is 12 to 14% of the time that tissue expander will get infected. When that infection occurs, it's a nightmare for the patient, and the tissue expander has to come out, all the treatments stop. So what MD Anderson came up with, they created a bioabsorbable wrap that's impregnated with 2 antibiotics to prevent those infections from occurring. So this is early on as well. So all these opportunities are in pretty large-sized markets. The cutaneous T-cell lymphoma drug that we launched, that we licensed, that's estimated right now at about a $300 million market here in the U.S. The catheter-related bloodstream infection market for Mino-Lok is a very large market. There's nothing in that marketplace right now. So this would be the first and only treatment that gets approved. We're estimating that at close to $2 billion in market opportunity, $1.8 billion to be exact. The hemorrhoid market, you can't even begin to calculate that because there's nothing there at the moment. And we know that there are at least 10 million patient visits to physicians for the treatment of hemorrhoids. As far as ARDS, which would be the indication for the mesenchymal stem cell drug, that's another it's a significant market because ARDS, which stands for acute respiratory distress syndrome, is a condition that afflicts about somewhere around 200 to 250,000 people, or 2 million, 250,000 people annually in the United States. Half will die automatically because there is no treatment for it. So all these markets are sizable and have great opportunities for us in terms of once these drugs get launched. As far as the management team is concerned, we do have a seasoned and well-experienced management team. As I always like to say, I'm not going to stand up in front of you and tell you that we don't have a team like that, but we do. And we've got a history of multiple transactions, multiple product launches, a lot of experience in the industry. And between Myron Holubiak and myself, we have 100 years combined experience in this business. Also, something that we have is that's something you'll never hear about from any other company that stands in front of you and you go to the next 1,000 conferences like this. And that is that we have put in our own money into the company. I have $22.5 million invested directly, and Myron Holubiak has $4 million invested directly for a total of $26.5 million. That's our own cash. That's not stock options. That's nothing that was done at favorable prices. We did it. We went in side by side on multiple raises with our investors. So our interests and the shareholder interests are completely aligned. So in terms of our pipeline and where we are as far as on timing, so as I said before, Iontech, which is our cutaneous T-cell lymphoma drug, that's in late phase 3, BLA fileable, we believe, in the second half of this year in 2022. Mino-Lok, last patient in, be completed by the end of this year. Halo-Lido, we're just about to embark on a phase 2B trial, and the other 2 drugs are in a preclinical phase. So these are the mug shots of our management team. So basically, so all of you can take a good look at them. My background is just a combination of big pharma, mid-sized pharma, and then for the last 25 years I've been on the entrepreneurial side of the business with creating companies with successful exits. Myron Holubiak, who is now the executive vice chair of the company, big background. He was with Hoffman LaRoche, became the vice president of marketing. Left Hoffman LaRoche, formed his own company, ultimately sold it to Dun & Bradstreet. When he was running the whole business unit for D&B, they came to him and asked him to become the president of Roche Labs US, which he served for a number of years. Jamie Bartouch, our CFO. What I like to highlight about him, he has a photographic memory, which is an important attribute for any CFO. Dr. Myron Chuchman was an addition to our staff last year. We brought him on board. Dr. Chuchman is a real KOL in the sense that he spent 23 years at Roswell Park in Rochester, which is a major cancer treatment center, as the head of lymphoma and myeloma, published or co-published 180 papers in that field, and then ultimately went and joined Celgene, where he was the vice president of worldwide research in lymphoma. Great background, and by accident, he was a great addition for us when we went into acquiring that drug from Dr. Reddy, because he had a complete background, knew all about the drug. Gary Talrico is our EVP operations, extensive background and experience in pharma, worked at a number of companies, some of them with me over the years. Kelly Creighton, Dr. Creighton joined us just recently. Dr. Creighton is a worldwide expert in CMC and manufacturing as far as filings with the FDA are concerned. He's participated and done hundreds of filings, and if there's one thing that sinks most of the small biotech companies today, it's the fact that they get a deficiency notice on their filing. It's called a complete response letter, and most of the time it's all in connection with deficiencies associated with manufacturing. We're making sure that that's not going to happen with us by bringing Dr. Creighton on board. Dr. Kessler is also a new addition to our staff on the regulatory side, and lots of experience with many filings and many interactions with the FDA. Jay Waddicker is our EVP of Business Operations and Strategy. Dr. Alan Lader is our Senior Vice President of Clinical Operations, who used to be an instructor at Harvard's Medical School. Ilana Allen is our Investor Relations VP, and great background also in terms of IR for other companies. So our SAB, it's a who's who in infectious disease and cell therapy. The infectious disease side of it is led by Dr. Isam Rad. Dr. Rad is he's the head of infectious disease at MD Anderson. He's world-renowned, has published or co-published hundreds of papers, well-known, highly regarded, has trained many of the infectious disease specialists that are out there practicing today that have cycled through that program at MD Anderson. He's also the inventor of Mino-Lok and Mino-Wrap as well. The rest of it, Dr. Rupp is known for the fact that he treated the very first Ebola patient that came into the United States. So with that, we also have a great cell therapy group led by Dr. Michael Mathey. Dr. Mathey is the University of California, San Francisco, probably knows more about ARDS and cell therapies than any other physician in the world. So let me give you a backgrounder now in terms of Iontech. And before I get into the drug, I just need to give you a quick history of it, all right? This drug was originally developed by Ligand, and Ligand ultimately sold it to Citius Pharmaceuticals of Japan, one of the largest pharma companies in the world, and they took that drug through. It was approved, and when it got approved, it had a stipulation in it that they had to reformulate it. So it was on the market maybe for 3 years when Eisai decided that they wanted to pull the drug and do the reformulation work. So they did that. After they were completed, they went back to the FDA, and the FDA said, well, you've got a brand new drug here. So at this point now, what you have to do is you've got to do a lead-in trial, and you have to do a phase 3 study with 70 patients, which Eisai agreed to do. That study got started in 2014 for 70 patients, which just to give you an idea in terms of the difficulties they had recruiting, because it is for a very rare cancer, so getting patients into those trials is very difficult. And somewhere in 2016, Eisai licensed the drug to Dr. Reddy Laboratories, but they continued doing all the work. So they shepherded this drug through the whole clinical process, as well as headed up all the efforts in their interactions with the FDA. And about 2 years ago, Dr. Reddy decided that they were an Indian generic company, and they had invested significantly in the U.S. market to really try and broaden their business into the branded side. And ultimately, 2 years ago, they came to the conclusion that they didn't belong in the branded business. They wanted to get back into their basics. They would stay with generics. So they made a decision to divest all their assets. There was an auction. We found out about it. There was an auction for this, and we won that auction with a $40 million bid, which is significant, but we felt confident about it because of the fact that this was so late phase. When we entered into those discussions with them, their last patient was already in the trial. So we knew that the last patient in was going to end in December of 21. We also knew that there was going to be a BLA filing, which was our BLA filing in the second half, and a top-line readout in March. So basically, what is this drug? So this drug is actually it's a combination of an engineered IL-2 inhibitor along with a deuteriotoxin fusion protein, and it has a dual mode of action. It's a little bit hard to follow, but basically what it does is it binds with the IL-2 receptor to kill tumor cells directly, or malignant T cells, and also it will unleash potent immune response against tumors by eliminating Treg cells. So basically, this is a unique MOA. No one has this kind of drug on the market today. So basically, this is the kind of the timing on everything as far as what I just described for you. So as you can see here, the BLA submission is anticipated second half 2022, early on now. So we're getting close to that already. So and we anticipate this being approved for a commercial launch in 2023. So it's right on top of us. The good news on this is that it's a very small number of physicians that are going to be writing prescriptions for this drug. These are oncologists, but this is even smaller because it's a very small universe of treaters for this very rare cancer. A lot of these patients wind up going to the major cancer centers, and then the follow-up is done, as far as the treatments go, probably at places more close to their homes. So T-cell lymphoma itself it's an awful disease. It starts out as a skin disease. It has a dermatological manifestations, and actually dermatologists are the initial treaters for this disease. But then ultimately it has to go to, once it gets into the tumor phase, it starts out topically, goes into the tumor phase, and that's when the oncologist has to come in. It is usually fatal, so, or it can be. Now there's variability here. Some patients usually never enter into that tumor phase and wind up staying at that initial dermatological stage. But for those that enter into the tumor phase, for the most part, it is usually fatal. There's two types of CTCLs, as you can see there, mycosis fungoides and Sézary syndrome. The majority, this is the majority male in terms of its prevalency, and it usually appears in patients in their 50s and 60s. So the single-arm trial that was completed here was completed in December of 21. The FDA gave some comments at that time as to how they were going to evaluate the efficacy of this. And basically, they're going to be looking at it in its totality. They're also going to look at some of the work that was done earlier on this when it was first approved. And so basically, but just to give you the top line results, I need to highlight this. There were two types of results. One was from an independent evaluated group of oncologists and dermatologists that looked at the data after the treaters had looked at it and done their own rating. So there's differences here from that point of view, and that is that the investigators themselves had an overall response rate of 42.3%, whereas the independent evaluators had an overall response rate of 36.2%. We don't think it's going to make any real difference as far as the FDA is concerned in terms of evaluating this and ultimately getting this approved. The reason being is because this was already been on the market before, and even though it's considered to be a brand new formulation, it is virtually the same formulation. The only difference was that some unfolded proteins came out of it. So this is this has there are competitors in this market since Ligand or Eisai first came out with it. Some additional competition came out, was approved, which is good. And the reason for it is because the pricing in this category right now is $250,000 to $300,000 for a course of therapy. So you don't have to get a lot of patients in order to achieve significant sales volume in here. And we believe that for the most part, there are limitations with the other drugs that are on that are being used for the treatment of CTCL. But we think that what we'll have here is that ultimately we will fit in with everybody else. So as they go through one drug, they'll go to another drug, they'll go to the third drug, they'll even go to a fourth drug if they can. So basically all this with the idea in mind of trying to keep that patient alive. So this has pretty good exclusivity as far as we can see at the moment. The manufacturing on this is very tricky, very complicated. So that's a barrier, and that manufacturing, the process itself is not being disclosed anywhere. This does have orphan drug, but it also has BLA exclusivity associated with it. So we'll have 12 years of market exclusivity once this is approved, which is significant, even though this doesn't even have a patent anymore in reality. So, but there are patents that are going to be pending on its use in other types of potential indications where we're going to combine it with other immuno-oncology drugs, and we're looking at that right now. So basically, that the potential for expansion here is one where the next indication down the road from this is cutaneous T-cell lymphoma, but there's also something known as peripheral T-cell lymphoma, and peripheral is a much bigger patient population. But the exciting part is right now there are 2 investigator INDs in place for using it in combination with, number 1, with Keytruda. That study is being conducted at the University of Minnesota, and then also in combination with T-cells. So that T-cell combination study is being done at the University of Pittsburgh. Those are very early on. We don't know anything at the moment. So I'm getting the 5-minute highlight, so I'm going to have to go through Mino-Lok real quick. So basically, Mino-Lok, as you know, it's for the treatment of infected catheters. What Mino-Lok does is it salvages the catheter so that when a patient comes down with an infected catheter, today the only standard of treatment is to remove that catheter and replace it with a new catheter. 2 separate surgical procedures, a lot of pain and suffering with those patients that go through this. This is something that Dr. Rad invented, so all that happens here is basically the patient's sitting there, the nurse comes in, injects the solution into the catheter, locks the catheter so it does not go into the body itself, and then after 2 hours, comes in, aspirates out the contents, flushes the line, so the patient has 22 hours of uninterrupted IV flow. This is significant. So, and what happens is 5 to 7 days in a row with this kind of treatment, it'll eliminate the biofilm and every other infection that's in that catheter. Does not go into the body, does not treat the infection that's inside the body. That has a separate course of treatment associated with it. So we had a phase 2B trial that the FDA liked. We had 100% efficacy with that. So basically, this is our protocol for it. We're at the very end with this now. We got COVIDized. So this trial was being done in hospitals, and if you know, as all of you know, for 2 years these hospitals were shut down. So they've now reopened or starting to reopen, and we are now ramping up, and we will have this trial completed by the end of the year. We've got QIDP status, which is really critical qualified infectious disease product. It gives us a 6-month review time and 5 additional years of market exclusivity on top of what Hatch-Waxman gives you. So we'll have almost 10 years of market exclusivity associated with this. It's a great drug, great opportunity. So I'm not going to cover the hemorrhoid drug at this point. Just to give you a quick summary here, 146 million shares outstanding. As you can see, between myself and Myron Holubiak, we have close to 14% of the shares in the company. Our goal is not to dilute this company anymore. We will not. I'm going to categorically state that. We will not do anything to dilute this company. So that's important for all you, because for all those that are shareholders to know and understand this, as I said before, our interests with the shareholders are completely aligned 100%. This is what our platform looks like as far as where we're going to have significant events. So as you can see, we've got starting with the phase 3 top-line data already occurred. The Halo-Lido phase 2B trial results begin somewhere in this very soon, the first half. We have a BLA submission in the second half, and then phase 3 completion by the end of 2022. So do I have time for questions? 2 minutes. Any questions? Okay, go ahead. So the other potential indications for Iontech are peripheral T-cell lymphoma, which is a much larger market segment, and then it's the combination of either Keytruda or the combination of a T-cell inhibitor. So basically, those are individual IND studies that are being done. One is being done at the University of Minnesota. The other one's being done at the University of Pittsburgh. They're physician IND directed, as you probably are familiar with that process. Any doctor can basically notify the FDA they want to run trials for something that's not on the market, not approved, and usually the FDA will grant those kind of studies. So we'll get a good indicator from those. If there's any promise in that, the way they turn out, then obviously we would expand into those areas. Okay. Any other questions? So all of you are expected to stay here after this is over. You'll be taking a written test, and I'll grade you afterwards. All right. Thank you.